Hey everybody, what is up? It is a special edition of a podcast, and it is that time of year where it is the 2023 GolfWRX Members Choice presented by Second Swing, and I've got two guys from Second Swing, Drew and Mike, both here with me. We're going to talk best drivers, and if you aren't familiar with the Members Choice, it is basically where you get to choose your favorite equipment throughout this golf year, what you're loving, and you get to choose it. We love doing this every year. It's so cool to hear the members' kind of voices. But Drew, Michael, how you guys doing, man? Thanks for taking the time to join me. This is awesome. Excited to talk to you guys about some drivers.
Yeah, this is awesome. First of all, the Golf WRX community, it's awesome to be a part of it in this way because, obviously here at Second Swing we are gigantic gearheads, and so there's a lot of kind of overlap there. And of course, I know both of us, we always are, talking throughout the company, not just with the fitters, but everybody involved with, whether it's the inventory team or the merchandise team. I mean, there's all kinds of connections that we have where we're paying attention to the products that are performing the best or the products that people are most interested in. And so this is just, it's fun to be a part of this for sure.
Yeah, it's great to chat with a fellow nerd, basically. That's if I had to condense that, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was funny because when we were talking about we were kind of scheduling this show and when we were going to record it, and it was funny when we were on the call. It was like, who's going to be on? And I think you guys named about 6 people that potentially could be on. And like, well, here's that's a gear guy, and that's a gear guy, and he's a gear nerd. Oh, it was like you guys had just a list of people that could have come on to talk drivers or talk equipment, and that's pretty awesome because when you work in the golf world, I think we all can agree we kind of get sucked into the world, and whether it's equipment or swings or course architecture, there's something about this game that just pulls you in, and it's cool to, like you said, hang out and talk with some gear nerds because it's just a blast.
Right, and especially when it comes to drivers too, it's like everybody wants that distance, right? Everybody's trying to hit that ball as far as possible in this day and age. So that's where we got to start with the drivers, right?
That's right. We got to go with the big dog. And the interesting thing, because you mentioned it too, was fitting. And I think if you're not familiar with kind of like the latest and greatest kind of Second Swing, as you guys are as a company, I know that when I was first introduced to it, 20 years ago, it was just a place that you could either, trade in some clubs and buy new stuff and, have a good deal on a used set of irons or something. And now you guys have totally transformed, and fitting is an absolute huge, huge part of what you guys do now. And you guys have some pretty big names and some longtime fitters who are just been around forever and probably forgotten more about fitting than like I'll ever remember. But talk a little bit about like how much, you guys do a lot of fitting and it's at, all your locations, right?
All our locations, yeah. I think what's great about the Second Swing tour van fitting process is it's really what Golf WRX has done with the Members Choice, which is this great, unbiased, kind of created this real credibility among just the true, golf purists out there. Second Swing, it's really Members Choice in the fitting base. We're an unbiased company. We really let the ball speed, let the smash factor tell the story, and that's at all of our locations. That's what our fitters do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And he mentioned the big names that are fitting, and I know you work very closely with Larry Bobka as one of them. Yep. I know he's been featured on Golf WRX a couple times in various past pieces of content. So that's sort of the tip of the iceberg, if you will, for what we have in terms of the fitting staff here. And like he said, it's all brand agnostic. When someone comes in for a fitting, it's which ones do you want to try? Which ones are you interested in the most? And then from there, they can hit them. We give, our fitters give the recommendations, show the data, and then it's a combination of what do you want to look at, what do you want to see in the performance, and then also our fitters go through extensive training and give the recommendations.
Yeah, and that's pretty awesome because, like I said, I was familiar years ago, and now to see the kind of that transformation and being able to kind of offer, like you said, that tour level, brand agnostic, just whatever's the best, that's the best. So,
right,
yeah, but Members' Choice is done, the voting's over, and we have a top 5. So let's get into the top 5 drivers. We're going to start with number 5. And this one here is going to be the Callaway Paradigm Triple Diamond. Which is interesting because I think a lot of places the Triple Diamond may not be as a popular model with Golf WRX. We tend to have those core golfers who play a lot of golf, who tend to, trend on the lower side of handicap. So the Triple Diamond has been a great driver for Callaway. I know I hit it. I was really impressed with how stable it is for kind of a more player-focused driver, a little more neutral bias driver. And, it's just one of those, it's a little more playable, a little more forgiving. You can get away with a bad swing, but you still get tons of distance, tons of ball speed. What are you guys' thoughts on the Paradigm Triple Diamond?
Well, right away in 2023, was it back in January? I think it won like 4 out of 5 weeks or something crazy like that right away.
Yeah.
And of course, you have John Rahm playing the driver, that kind of helps. But
winning the Masters,
definitely.
Right? Yeah. Just a little tournament called the Masters.
Yeah.
But
a little invite down to Georgia.
Right. But I mean, like you said, it is really stable, and I think there was almost prior to this year and last year where it became, prior to the Rogue ST series, it was a niche thing where it was a kind of like. The Triple Diamond wasn't even really openly available to the public necessarily, and so they kind of made it sort of more available as a staple of the line, the driver line, and they kind of took out the the LS or the Max LS or whatever it might be, because they were kind of able to incorporate some of those forgiving properties into the Triple Diamond a little bit more, and you're seeing the performance, and in the fitting bays it's been great too. Like you mentioned, especially for those players that have the lower handicaps or generate that speed.
Yeah, I think so often in fitting bays you see customers come in with kind of a preconceived notion of they have maybe a couple options, but there's really one that they're really thinking in particular, and the Triple Diamond kind of model wasn't one of those. I don't feel like it was heavily marketed, but just by sheer performance, it kind of rose to the level where Callaway decided, hey, this is now kind of our low spin model, right. Kind of our flagship tour model.
Yeah, and the biggest thing I noticed with that, because like you said, it kind of hit like what did they announced it kind of right around January, beginning of the year, and unfortunately for us here in Detroit, we're indoors. But I remember taking it out and hitting it, and the biggest thing that I kind of noticed was the spin consistency between center strikes and off center strikes, like how tight that window is, where you don't see shots really ramp up in RPM when you miss the face, or they don't drop really hard if you hit it, off the toe. It really kind of stayed really consistent with those spin numbers, and it was pretty impressive to see from a driver that you don't think of as being, you think of you need to hit it on the center to get the max performance out of it, and you really don't, which was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you think of. I mean, I think the average player that might go on the GolfWRX website and look at the what's in the bag, and they see all these pros using Triple Diamond, and they're like, well, that's not for me, right? Because I'm a 10 handicap, and I'm just trying to hit the ball farther and straighter and not trying to work it or anything like that. But you're right. I mean, especially on the low face too, that seemed like what our fitters, when I was talking to them, we actually did a survey earlier this spring, back in just among the fitters internally, kind of getting some information on what they thought initially the performance, and that was a comment that I got back was the Triple Diamond ball speed retention, but especially even low on the face, that they had noticed a couple times in their fittings that speed and that distance hadn't dropped off as much as they maybe would have thought, or maybe it would with another low spin model.
Yeah, no, it's I mean, the whole Paradigm line has been phenomenal, but yeah, that Triple Diamond I think has really kind of made the biggest jump, like you said, getting rid of the Max LS and kind of incorporating a little bit of that into a player's model. I think it's just worked as a great combo that isn't necessarily for just a scratch player. If you are, just an athletic player who just needs a little spin reduction, you can still get that forgiveness even though you may be a higher handicap, and have a driver that just plays really, really well. You don't have to move to something super unforgiving to get low spin, which is really great.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we see that with everybody. It's the same thing,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So then we move into number 4, which is another kind of low spin, kind of player focused model.
Yeah.
But Ping and the G430 LST. Again, a great kind of low spin option for somebody out there who needs it. But what do you guys feel about the LST model from Ping this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've almost, I want to say, mastered the low spin plus forgiveness in one driver head. That's the the overarching theme from every fitter that I've spoken to in the stores, whether it be in the Twin Cities or elsewhere in the company. It's just that it's a low spin model, but it's forgiving enough to be one of those kind of standard high MOI series models that is like the flagship driver for every new manufacturer, every new series out there. And then you're seeing it on tour now. Guys are winning with it. Gals are winning with it. That's where Ping, I think, really shines, is just the stability and forgiveness in really all of their clubs, but I think the LST models in particular, that MOI number is pretty high.
Yeah, that was the word that I was going to kind of jump on, was stability. I think that's the word we hear the most. I think ping has a pretty, in my opinion, kind of a pretty distinct kind of acoustic kind of feel. It feels sort of, ping players tend to just continue to play ping products, and the G425 was an excellent product, and ping has resisted the urge to just sort of kind of run the same playbook, and I think the fact that they've continued to really raise their game, and I mean, you see it, not to jump too far ahead, but the next one on our list is ping again, because they just continue to kind of rise to the occasion.
And the thing I like about the G430 series as a whole, and I think the LST encompasses a lot of it, especially because I think the better players notice it a lot too, is the improvement in ball speed. Because I feel like, like you said, 425 was a great driver, super forgiving. It was a big step, I thought, up. But all ping drivers are really stable, really great, but they've never been put in the same ball speed category as some other brands.
Right.
When you talk about ball speed, they're never the first name mentioned. And I feel like the 430 series, especially the LST, you're seeing a lot of players finally say, like, yes, the ball speed now is there. It can compete with, X, Y, and Z out there. And they've improved the sound a ton, which I think has brought a little the non-ping players to really give some of these ping drivers a try, because some guys, acoustics is a very, very big thing, and they won't necessarily play a driver that doesn't sound or feel or whatever a certain way.
Right. I think one of the things that I said when we were doing our initial testing for YouTube on the 430s was in the fitting bays at the store, if someone was, in our demo bays, you can take one off the rack and go test it out. If someone was hitting a G425 driver, you could tell anywhere in the store where you were. You could tell that, okay, they're hitting a G425. But that's not the same. That's not the case with the G430s, I don't think. So kudos to Ping for, there is something to be said about identifying it and realizing this is, the weakness of our product here, for example, and going right to the source and, re-innovating it and making it better.
Yeah, no, I agree, and it's nice because it is just a low spin option that also has a lot of adjustability too. Like, so you can dial in a player who isn't somebody who just hits a perfectly straight ball every time, or isn't a pro who can work it. You've got a lot of adjustability there for a fitter to kind of really dial that in for particular swings and particular flight bias that they need to accommodate. So it's nice to have those options probably from the fitter side as well.
Oh yeah, any type of fitter option, adjustability, our fitters will geek over it, so the more the merrier in that regard.
Yeah. And then, like you said, with number 3, we move, again, still kind of with Ping, with a Ping G430 Max. And it's interesting because I felt like the 425, well, you'll hear the Max technically got more votes than the LST. I felt like more people talked about the LST, but now looking at votes, the Max wins out. But the 425 Max was absolutely phenomenal. Going back to the 400 Max, the 400 Max was that cult driver that people still play today and still really love. The 410 didn't quite have the same lure, even though it was a great driver. The 425 Max was great, and now the 430 Max, I think, as we said about like the LST, you got better sound, better feel, and better ball speed, and it's just creating a driver that people really, really want to try and really want to see how it works for them.
Yeah, the G430 Max, that one has been lauded so much in the fitting bay, and forgiveness, we already talked about that with Ping, but to see them kind of round into form a little bit more, even with the ball speed there, and then the playability across basically any type of player that shows up for a fitting, is fantastic. So there's a lot of positives to be said there with the G430 Max, and Ping will just keep moving forward in that regard. I don't think they'll stop, right?
Yeah, I think especially sort of that middle handicapper. I think we've come to maybe expect, maybe this is just kind of a cynical take, but you kind of expect manufacturers when they have a great release, kind of one on, one off. But the fact that I think people responded so well to the G425 and then have shown out again for the G430. Again, you really can't praise Ping enough.
Yeah, and like you said, you're always going to have the Ping people. There's Ping fans. Yeah. They love the brand. They love the looks, the feel, the story behind it. They love everything that is just kind of Ping. And those people will always, go out there and try those Ping drivers and all other equipment. But I think the 430 is the first one that really will bring in people who played other brands, whether it was TaylorMade, Titleist, Callaway. This is, I think, one of the ones that, even more so than the 425, will really draw people in because of, the things that Ping improved. And they didn't go crazy and, put a crazy face or use wild materials. I mean, they finally did put a carbon crown on a modern driver. I mean, they did it with the Rapture years ago, but, we're back to seeing it again. But they're just doing the little things that Ping does, like you said, to not miss. They're always innovating, but not going crazy. It's just those little improvements that keep the people happy, and they know what to expect with a Ping, which is kind of nice. But then, you're also pulling those people in who are going, wow, it's really how good? I've been reading all these things or hearing all these things or watching YouTube videos or whatever, and all of a sudden they're like, well, I got to go try it now. And that's pretty cool if you're, somebody probably seeing the Ping offices, down in Arizona.
Yeah, and I would have to imagine, too, just by me following, your website and what have you on social media, it seems like there's more big-name, non-contracted players playing G430 than maybe Ping drivers of the past. That's merely a gut feeling and not necessarily backed by data, but it seems like that's the case just by what I am seeing.
No, I 100% agree with you. I think that we've seen, I think G400, back when that came out, I think was probably closest.
That was a great one,
yeah, that you saw, guys like Patrick Reed and a bunch of other guys who were not Ping staff players, trying the driver or playing it. And this year, I agree with you 100%. I mean, from the Jason Days to, even Justin Rose, all these players who are now free agents going out and, if not maybe necessarily gaming them all the time, having one built in the bag, on the range, testing, shows you that there's something there. And they're seeing it, and, when those guys have the ability to play whatever they want, they can walk into any tour truck and ask for a driver, and it's going to get built. So to say that, hey, they're testing these means, they're holding their own against everything out there. And, even the best players in the world sometimes needs a little stability and a little forgiveness. They don't hit it dead center every single time. Close, but not every single time.
Their misses are closer to the center than mine are, but that's a different discussion, I'm sure.
That's definitely true. And then also with Ping, they got the Max, but then you'd also have that, I think, the HL, that's kind of a version of that again, you can kind of, as a fitter, just more options to get a player into something that fits their swing, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, actually, I'll speak from a personal story because my wife got fit for the G430 HL.
Yeah.
So it's obviously not the quote unquote women's driver, but it was fit that way with the quick shaft, and it's greatly improved her performance off the tee. So from that perspective, I definitely endorse the G430 family as a whole with the drivers, but of course, from this discussion with the Max, the technology is all there, and clearly the performance is too.
Yeah, and again, like the LC, a ton of adjustment between hosel adjustment, movable weights, and everything that Ping offers in terms of custom fitting. If you need a digitally lofted head, whatever, you guys can, as fitters, can really dial somebody in to the nth degree, which you can't necessarily do with some other brands, which has to be nice when you're in that bay.
Right. Yeah. I think there's nothing our fitters like more than dialing in a Ping G430, or perhaps, unless we get to these next couple drivers, maybe that's the next best thing, right?
Yeah.
Depending on the player.
Yeah, exactly. No, our fitters hear options, they hear adjustability, and their smiles light up.
Oh, yeah.
And anyone you'll meet.
Yeah. Well, I think by nature you're kind of a problem solver, and having creative ways to solve those problems is just, it always lights up guys like that say, well, wait a minute, what can I do? You just tweak this here and there. So, and you're like, great. So we give them kind of the top two, and number two is actually my personal driver, what I'm playing right now, which is the Titleist TSR2. So the TSR series has been, it's kind of the old guy in the group in a way, even though it's current. It kind of came out last year. But the TSR2, I think, has been kind of a big leap in terms of players using it, just because, I think everybody focused on the TSI 3 previous generation. And now I think a lot of players are noticing that the 2 is really, really broad in terms of the player that it fits. What do you guys see over there from the TSR2?
Well, I think I'm going to go with a story that Titleist, when they were kind of educating the fitters here, they shared with us, and they mentioned when Chesson Hadley was testing the drivers, and he was a TSI 3 player, and so he was deciding, TSR3, TSR2, is it worth putting either one of them in the bag? And, he tested them both, and he's like, great, I'm going to go with TSR3. And actually, he didn't know this, but the Titleist reps were saying, actually, you were just hitting the TSR2. So he didn't notice because of the shape difference. He didn't notice that the more compact design of the TSR2 kind of threw him off there. He thought he was hitting the low spin model. So I think that kind of speaks to what Titleist has done to refine that shape a little bit. But like you said, the performance of it, the forgiveness and stability is still there. That aerospace design on the club face or that material is still just incredible speed, right? So there's still a playability for a huge range of players, despite maybe a little bit more compact shape.
Yeah, I think the big thing that jumps out for me with the TSR line is I think sometimes consumers' marketing starts to sort of wash over them. It's just there's a tidal wave of kind of the next big thing. And so I think when Titleist came out with the Titleist Speed Project kind of docu-series, I think there were some consumers that, while it was well produced, they were like, oh, well, really? Okay, well, let's see. You came out with your documentary. Let's see if it delivers. And the fact that it's still here a year later, again, I don't want to spoil number one, but they've really delivered. And I think that consumers really appreciate these companies that work off these 2-year cycles, and they're not constantly kind of rushing the market. I think there's a real faith in Titleist, and the TSR2 is a great example of that.
Yeah, and I think I like the TSR2 because, as you mentioned, that you can have a guy who's on tour playing it, and then a person who's out there and like I'm a bad 9 handicap, and I can go out and play it, and the way they design kind of the face, the face is different on the TSR2 as opposed to the 3, where they've kind of changed even the face design behind the scenes to kind of know that, hey, that player who plays the 2 is probably going to miss it a little more heel toe, and so let's try to kind of expand that sweet spot a little bit across the face that way. I mean, it's just kind of a unique thing of how they designed it, but I love that it's a good combination of being a very forgiving driver, but also not being, while it's not the lowest spinning driver in Titleist's lineup, it's still not a driver that spins a ton. And like you said about the face, it's got great ball speed pretty much everywhere. You don't have to hit it center, and you can still walk away with a pretty good shot.
Right, and I mean, the fact that, like you mentioned on the timeline, I mean, this was a driver that had been out, or the series had been out, last, I guess, a year ago. So last August or last September is when it was publicly available. You could go get fit. You had those 3 or 4 months, and then you had everything in January come out. That was brand new, and the TaylorMades, the Callaways, Cobras, Pings, and we're sitting here now a year later, and Titleist TSR2, and again, no spoilers on the number 1, but we're still talking about these ones as the highest ranked among your members. So. I mean, Titleist has gone from really back in the 900s, we're talking about 910, 913, 915, where they had some issues with their drivers, and they acknowledged it in the documentary that you mentioned. They had some issues, and they've really buckled down, and they have turned kind of their weakness, I would say, almost as a brand. You could argue to potentially their biggest strength, or one of their biggest strengths.
Yeah, well, like you said, the deficiency there, I mean, it's kind of like Ping a little bit. When I remember back in those 900 series days, Ping or Titleist was never thrown in there as like a top ball speed competitor. It's like they always looked great, they sounded great. You could kind of work the ball. They performed in certain ways that were really good, but they never were, again, in that conversation of, man, that was the fastest driver I ever hit. They never had those ball speed claims. And players played them because they wanted to kind of play Titleist, or they liked that look or that feel. But there probably always was something that might have been a little bit longer, which was, a little bit of a bummer because guys would move on or play something else on the top end of the bag. But the TSR2, it's cool also that, like what you said, the shape looks way better than the previous TSR2. So if you're a guy like me who's kind of that higher handicap, you still look down and you kind of feel good about what you're playing because it looks like a driver a tour pro would play, and it looks like that, and it just gives you that kind of confidence at address that not every club gives you. And that, like, I know I like that, and some other people do as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said about just how clean these TSR drivers really look. Like, it's I know there's other brands that have done certain things, or different colors or shapes, or there's turbulators or whatever there is that's on the crown that may or may not distract a certain golfer, but the Titleist one, they have been clean for a long time, and they even refined it even a little bit more, and it's just so easy to look at.
It's just the minimalist. It's just a very professional setup. It's it's black. How do you stop that?
Yeah, it's super easy, and there's nothing to distract you whatsoever.
Yeah. AC/DC kind of wrote the playbook 20 years ago. So
that's right, or Spinal Tap, or the album can get none blacker. So it's that look, but no, it is, like I said, and it's what's in my bag at the moment. I have a lot of drivers, but that's the one that's kind of the gamer. So I'm a fond of it. And then, like you said, we'll kind of jump into number one, which is I guess I was a little surprised, but not really surprised at the same time. But Titleist TSR3 ends up being the number one, and the reason I'm not shocked is I think it's a very stable driver for what it is, and I think it, again, more playable for players, much like the Triple Diamond, the Paradigm Triple Diamond. I think this is a very playable driver for a wide range of handicaps. You don't have to be, a single-digit 5 below type player to use this. You can, you got some forgiveness there, and that's kind of nice that you don't. You're not stuck being a better player to have to use this driver.
Right. I think, and to your point, I'm also kind of surprised to see the 3 above the 2, because I think, and even when talking to our fitters here and referring back to that survey that I kind of took within the fitting team back in March, was in the fitting that they've done, the TSR2 has been far and away, the more usable, I guess, or more apt to be fit for a player. And I think that just speaks to how versatile it is. But that wasn't really a knock on the TSR3 performance or the capabilities of it. It was just, I think the step forward was much bigger for the 2 versus the 3 compared to the TSI series. However, again, we're not trying to knock the TSR3, because that thing, it checks all the boxes, and you've got more adjustability. There's so many things to like about the TSR3.
It's in my bag, and if you're a bad 9, I'm a horrible 3. So I absolutely am in love with the driver. It's fantastic. I think it's so interesting, kind of the point you bring up, where with the TSR2 they've started to pull more towards the low end at the tour players, and with the TSR3 they've almost pulled back almost towards the masses, and I certainly qualify for the masses. But yeah, I just couldn't echo more what you said. Again, it's the same gorgeous black aesthetic that you see in the TSR2, and again, they just continue to kind of shore up their weakness on the ball speed side.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because they kind of like Ping, they don't jump to totally different things out there. Like they kind of keep everything the same. They're still running all titanium construction. They're one of the few. I don't know if I can think of another driver that runs all titanium like them, but they're still getting performance that hangs with everything that just came out back in January, which was really impressive. And when I was hitting this, I hit the 2 and the 3. I got to go out to TPI, last year and hit them both, and really it came down to spin. The TSR2, while yes, it is a little more forgiving, and I like that, it was just the TSR3. I just couldn't spin it enough without really making some big drastic changes that you just didn't need to with the 2. Right. And that was kind of nice, where you could kind of look at it and say, okay, this just fits you better, and you don't have to really vary far from the look, the sound, the feel. All the metrics pretty much stay the same, but I'm getting the driver that kind of fits me better, where if somebody needs a little less spin, they're still not going to have to give up a ton of forgiveness. They're not going to have to give up a look. They're not going to have to give up anything, a whole lot, to move to a driver that just for them, whether it's launch, whether it's spin, whether it's, some little metric like that. I think the 2 and the 3, kind of how they overlap, I think that's one of those things that a player doesn't have to kind of necessarily sacrifice to get into the right driver for them.
Yeah, I think if you were to kind of create a Venn diagram of TSR3 and TSR2, I think there's a good blend of, it overlaps. It's not a circle, but it's not 2 separate circles either. you have the technologies kind of do merge enough where, like you said, it might just be one little thing that someone that's really trying to dial into. It might be the spin, or it might be, maybe even using the center of gravity adjustability on the TSR3 is enough to get them to use that driver versus the TSR2. Or perhaps it might be the face design, right? Whether it's the multi-plateau VFT or the speed ring of the TSR3. Those two things are slightly different, but they have different purposes depending on the player that you are, the tendencies you have with drivers. So they're so similar, but they are distinct enough that they provide different benefits for the golfer that's really trying to get dialed in.
Yeah, no, it's Titleist did a phenomenal job. I think it's got to be probably one of the more surprising lines of the year, just because I think when TSI came out, you were kind of like, wow, this is a huge improvement over TS, and you're kind of like, all right, where do they go from there? And to see TSR be a big improvement, tour adoption was, immediate. It seemed like as soon as those were available in the tour van, everybody was moving into a TSR3, TSR2 out on tour. It wasn't those, maybe I'll wait till the end of the year. I'll wait till we switch over, go to Hawaii. Maybe I'll switch then. It was just, they just switched over to them. It was like there was no adjustment period. It was just pop shaft and go, and these guys were gaming them almost immediately. So it was pretty impressive to see Titleist do something like that, because I don't think we're necessarily used to seeing that often from them.
I think there's something to be said about, you mentioned the speed project, right? And they kind of talked a big talk when they launched that speed project, was it 5 years ago now? But they kind of said, here's what's going to happen in 5 years. We're going to take these steps to become the fastest driver on tour, the best driver, the most played driver on tour, all these things. And that's a bold claim to make. And to follow through with it is really cool. And then obviously now it's showing out in the support by, the members and the golfers out there that are trying to pick a driver every year. It's clearly delivered. Yeah.
You talk about the Venn diagram. It's pretty cool when the sort of the populist out there, the GolfWRX voter, agrees with the guy in the tour truck. It's a pretty impressive model that can kind of marry those coalitions.
Right.
So that's the top 5. So again, you got Paradigm Triple Diamond at 5, kept from Callaway. The Ping G430 LST, number 4. Number 3, the Ping G430 Max. And then the Titleist TSR2 and number 2. And number 1, the champion this year, the Titleist TSR3. And now every year there's always, if you go into the comments in the voting section, there's always, it should be this driver, that driver, this is the better, that's better, whatever. I wanted to get your guys' takes on what you think is a driver that you're kind of shocked didn't make the list. Like, is there one that you think kind of has it's kind of like March Madness in basketball. There's always the snub. Somebody didn't make it that everybody thought they should. Their school, hey, we won a couple games, but what are the drivers that for each of you that you think probably should have been on the list, or you thought would be on the list that didn't make it?
Yeah, I'll start because when we did our initial kind of testing with the new stuff in January, we brought in Kevin Kraft. Kevin is one of our fitters out at the Columbia Second Swing store in Maryland. He's a professional player, plays on sort of the PGA section events, small senior professional events, whatever might be out there. But he's still kind of chasing that speed, right? Like, he's looking for any speed he can get. He's kind of climbing over 110 to 115 in the club speed when he's really feeling it. And he swears by the Aerojet driver, so I'm going to give the Aerojet driver some love from Cobra. And I mean, he thought that was the most stable driver of the year. Wow. Just in because when he goes in there, he kind of does his sort of speed training sessions, right? He's picking the Aerojet driver because he knows that when he's swinging really hard and might be missing the center of the face, that he seems to get the highest ball speeds consistently from that driver. And he's a guy I trust, so I'm going to go with what he said there on the Aerojet. And they've done a really good job with that driver, too. They've cleaned up a lot of their stuff. They're becoming less and less sort of, distracting, if you will, on what the crown looks like and sort of the designs. I think this year was a lot simpler, a lot cleaner, and I think that really paid off for him. So I thought, I know Cobra isn't sort of the most popular brand, and maybe there was maybe high expectation for maybe the members to vote him in on the top 5 here, but I do think that's a pretty good driver that is really showing out in the fittings when it's asked for golfers.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then for me, I mean, I feel like, using your March Madness analogy, I feel like it seems like every 5 or 6 years, a team like North Carolina misses the tournament, and that's kind of what it feels like with no TaylorMade on this list.
Yeah.
It seems like, with, we talk about one of the biggest marketing tools is obviously tour performance, and the TaylorMade tour staff is just, it's so deep and so impressive that, we see with Ping and Titleist, that kind of the 2-year cycle companies kind of rising to the top. I'm not sure if that's a factor, but no TaylorMade on this list was kind of a surprise for me.
Yeah, I was kind of with you. I actually thought the TaylorMade the standard Stealth 2, not the Plus. I thought the standard Stealth 2 was just a driver that, again, a little bit like the TSR2, would fit a wide range of golfers. You'd see some play on tour, you'd see some play by higher handicap players, and I felt like with the that hosel adjustability and kind of availability of lofts, things like that, you could dial that into kind of a wide range of players, and it's actually one for me that's performed really well. That kind of people I think sometimes are shocked a little bit that, like, you have all these things, you play a lot of Stealth 2, and why don't you play the Plus, why don't you whatever. And the Stealth 2 to me was just kind of a good mix of being forgiving. I think it's still pretty long. I mean, I've hit some great drives with it, and I'm a big fan. I like the carbon face sound and feel for whatever reason. Call me a little weird, but I loved it in the original Stealth, and I like it in Stealth 2. It just sounds and feels right to me for some reason.
Yeah, do you think that's maybe part of the reason that we aren't seeing, like, the feedback has been kind of iffy with is it the carbon face? People aren't quite, like, diving headfirst into that, and maybe it's just a change that, I don't want to say backfired on TaylorMade, but, maybe that's part of why it's not getting as much love in the Stealth and Stealth 2?
Yeah, I think maybe it's a sign of, I think it's more just people don't necessarily trust it. I think it may be just a hair before its time, much like when Callaway did with the C4, Yonex did it back in the day. And I think people are still kind of used to titanium. They're used to that. And even though you maybe see numbers in the bay that are good or better or whatnot, I think people just don't necessarily trust it. And I think also there's all that question about durability. I know when TaylorMade first came out, all the comments you saw everywhere, whether it was YouTube or our forum or whatever, was, well, how is that going to hold up? It'll never hold up. It'll never hold up. And these companies have big R&D budgets. They test these things, but I think there's just a little bit of just questioning it, and I just don't know if people are necessarily ready to dive all in yet. On that carbon face, but I think where the first Stealth, I think it lacked a little forgiveness on some certain shots on the face. I think that face, the flex was just a little bit different. You didn't see maybe the same ball speed on certain misses that you saw with other drivers, and I felt like that's a little better this year. That they've kind of improved that a little bit, but that I think is my take. But yeah, it was interesting. It just didn't have the buzz on there, and again, I'm the same with Cobra. I thought the LS is a phenomenal driver too. I think for a low speed guy a high spin player who needs some spin reduction while still have a driver that's pretty playable. It's not something that you have to be, have to hit it on the screws every time. I thought that was a driver that would make it onto this list a little easier, and it didn't, which was kind of surprising.
Yeah. I mean, I think Cobra is getting more and more recognition by the year. I think the fitter said that they're getting a little bit more requests for Cobra every year. So I think that message is starting to get out there year by year for Cobra. But just not quite there. I think this year. I think again, I think more of it is about how Titleist has 2 drivers in there, Ping has 2 drivers in there that are so highly lauded. I think it becomes just more difficult for all these other.
There's only 5 spots.
Right. There's only 5 spots. In the top 5. So I mean, now it kind of brings up the my own curiosity of like the top 10. What does the top 10 look like? But there's probably some of these names on that list that we're talking about right now.
Yep.
Yeah, they definitely are. I mean, those I'd have to get the full list again because again, in front of me I have kind of the 5 and their percentages. So, but I did see the full thing, and I think the TaylorMade Cobra, those were like just outside in terms of votes. And then the other one I think that's going to be interesting in the next couple of years, just because I think look at the improvement over the past kind of 2 generations. I wouldn't necessarily sleep on Srixon for the next driver when they come out. I think this one. The one out now, the Mark II, the ZX7, ZX5, ZX5 LS, the Mark IIs, are sneaky kind of good, and nobody knows they exist. I think the ball speed on them is really, really good. They're a little loud. They don't have necessarily the best sound, to me at least. But I think those are a driver company that give it a couple years, and we may see them kind of battling it out for a bigger chunk of the pie if people kind of like give them a chance, because I think they're starting to come out with some really, really good drivers lately.
Yeah, we actually did the video for the Mark II drivers for our YouTube channel back earlier this spring, and I think that was certainly one of the pieces of feedback you mentioned on the sound. It was definitely a distinct kind of higher pitched sound. It's sort of like the G425 of this year, if you will, where you can kind of, it's definitely different than the rest of them, right? But the performance, I mean, it was certainly there, right? And I think I also like that they added in, the ZX5 LS model too. So you kind of have the ZX7 as sort of the tinkerer's driver if you want to kind of move that weight heel or toe, and then you have the LS where if you're just trying to lower that spin, get as much ball speed and as much distance as you want, that ZX5 LS model is there. So I'm with you. I'm intrigued by what Srixon's going to do here.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where they go, and they I think what people don't realize that they have probably deeper pockets than people think. They probably a little bit like Mizuno just think, oh, they're just an iron company, and it's like, no, they do a lot outside, just that. And I think there's some R&D money from parent companies and things like that could definitely help everything, which much like Mizuno and Wilson and some of those other brands. So. But yeah, a really interesting list. Really cool to kind of see where players in our community are kind of rating these things, and it's pretty cool to see. So the last thing I'm going to ask you is in terms of like kind of fitting in your base. I mean, I think you said like TSR2 is probably something a little more popular. If you look at like Callaway, I mean the Triple Diamond I would assume is probably out of the 3 Callaway models right now, probably not number 1 on your guys' list. So, I mean, to you guys, you probably see a little bit more of the standard paradigm, maybe even a little more X than the Triple Diamond. But and typically, like for you guys in your stores and your fittings, I mean, you're probably seeing a little more of kind of the, as we call it, general golfer model, as opposed to the lower spin one like we're kind of seeing here. But is that generally the case for you guys?
Yeah, generally. The high MOI or standard is generally what will fit in to most players, and the type of golf we get in most of the time isn't the scratch player or the 120 mile an hour driver, swing speed, but that's where it's really nice that we can have anybody come in. I mean, you could be a brand new player, you could be someone that's played forever, you could be someone that swings 130 miles an hour. These manufacturers have options for all of you, and then our fitters are of course trained to fit any type of swing. So that's kind of the bonus. But to your point, yeah, I think the masses, if there was, or the generalization, it'd be, the TSR2, the Paradigm, the Stealth 2, the G430 Max, the Aerojet, the ZX5 Mark II. Those are kind of the ones that generally get the most play. But then, of course, we obviously recognize that there's all different kinds of swing types. There's people that swing faster or slower. Might need a draw bias model that are released by the manufacturers as well. So there's no limit, really.
Yeah, and I think those kind of special cases are the people that most feel inclined to go in and get fit and hit it in person. I think that's we're kind of the home for the special cases. So if you have 120 miles an hour, certainly please come in. We're not trying to. All are welcome.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So, all right, the thing I always love to end podcasts with, because I'm always a big fan, I always want to know what's our people's bags. I know we already have TS3, but what driver specs? I kind of want to know driver shaft. What any other special specs if you have them? What are you guys playing in the bags right now? Just for driver.
I'll start.
Just driver.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'll start. I've got a TaylorMade Sim 2 actually. I got fit a couple years ago here. I've got just the standard RDX smoke black shaft, the 6.5. I got some I guess Michael and I both have some speed. We're probably both in the 115 range with the driver. So, but I've got mine at 8 degree head, and on occasion I'll actually loft it down towards 7 if I'm launch it pretty high, because I do kind of have that upward attack angle, so got to keep that ball down to some degree. And it's one of those things that I've added some discipline to my game now, where I know I don't need to hit driver every single hole when I can hit it as far as I do sometimes. But that's what I got in my bag right now.
Yeah, awesome. I'm very similar. TSR3, 8 degrees, 80 gram extra stiff shaft. Like Drew, I don't necessarily, straightness is more important than distance at this point. I'm not playing 7,500 yard courses, but
no.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't be happier with my TSR3.
Yeah.
80 grams though is a little heavy though. Why? Do you play it short and heavy, or is it like still like full 45 and a quarter, something like that?
It's full. Yeah, it's full.
Wow. Okay. So
He,
I don't know why
he could swing a golf club. He's got some speed. He's got probably a little more than I do. So mine's a 70 grams. So I mean, it's yeah. I mean, maybe one of these days we'll have a long drive contest. We'll pull out the 50-gram shafts and see what we can do.
I think we need a little video on that. I think it's super lightweight. Get some Mitsubishi Vanquishes or something like that. Something super light. See how quick it can go.
We should get Mrs. Drew Mahowald. Get the G430 HL.
She was the 35-gram ultra quick.
Let's do it.
I love it. That'd be a great video. Just sit there tinkering, see how far you can possibly hit it. Accuracy means nothing, but how far you can hit it. And, I myself,
which circle to look at.
It would be pretty funny. So yeah, I'm a TSR2 10.5 or 10 degree guy with a Fuji Ventus TR Blue 6X. So 45 inches, nothing fancy. A1 setting. So actually not A1. I use all fit adapters, so it's all fit standard setting. But only because if you're watching this on YouTube and you see all the shafts behind me, I swap a lot of stuff out. So I like to mess around, and OEM tips kind of limit me. So that's the way I pull it off. So all right, well that was GolfWRX 2023 Members Choice Drivers presented by Second Swing. Drew, Michael, appreciate you guys coming on, man, taking time. It was awesome to talk some drivers. We're going to come back. We're going to do irons, probably fairway woods and hybrids. So if you like what you heard, please follow back. We're going to do a couple more shows and kind of get the some of the big things off the list. But gentlemen, I appreciate all your knowledge, your expertise, all that. It's been awesome. Thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. It was awesome.
Cheers.